You've done this today, probably without noticing. Replayed a sentence you said an hour ago and wondered if it landed wrong. Checked whether your last text sounds too eager or too cold. Felt your stomach drop slightly when someone didn't laugh at your joke or didn't reply as fast as you expected. None of that is a personality flaw. It's not just anxiety. It's a piece of ancient survival machinery, still fully operational, running in a world it was never built for. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the fear of being judged isn't weakness. It's one of the most sophisticated survival tools evolution ever produced. You'll see how it built the very foundation of human cooperation, how it's wired into your body at a level faster than conscious thought, and why the exact same system that once kept your ancestors alive is now in a completely different environment, quietly working against you. To understand why this fear exists, you have to stop thinking about the world you live in now and think about the world it was built in. For roughly 95% of the time modern humans have existed, we lived in small, mobile bands. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar's research on primate brain size suggests humans evolved to comfortably track relationships with somewhere around 150 people, a number that shows up again and again across hunter-gatherer bands, historical village sizes, and even modern military companies. That wasn't a small circle of your life. For most of human history, that was the entire social universe a person would ever know. The same faces from birth to death. In that world, there was no anonymity to disappear into, no neighboring city to quietly relocate to if things went badly. Your reputation wasn't a preference other people happened to have about you. It functioned closer to infrastructure. If the group trusted you, you got warned when predators were near. You got included in the hunt. You got fed during a lean season because someone remembered you'd done the same for them. If the group judged you as selfish, deceptive, or unreliable, none of that was guaranteed. And this is the part that matters most. Exile in that environment wasn't a symbolic punishment, the way being unfriended or blocked is today. It was closer to a resource cutoff with your name on it. Alone, without the group's shared knowledge of terrain, without its collective labor, without its numbers as a defense against predators or rival bands, your odds of survival dropped sharply and fast. Being disliked in that world wasn't an emotional inconvenience. It was a leading indicator of real physical risk. And under that kind of evolutionary pressure, across hundreds of thousands of years, you don't end up with a species that shrugs off social rejection. You end up with a species that becomes obsessed, quietly, constantly, with detecting the earliest possible sign of it. Here's where it gets more interesting, because this isn't simply a story about humans learning to care what others think through culture or upbringing. It's wired in at a much more automatic, involuntary level than that. In the early 2000s, neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger ran a now well-known experiment using a simple ball-tossing game called Cyberball. Participants believed they were playing catch virtually with two other people. In reality, those other players were programmed to eventually stop passing the ball altogether, quietly excluding the participant from the game. The exclusion itself was almost comically trivial. Strangers, a pointless game, zero real-world consequences of any kind. And yet the brain scans showed something striking. The same regions that activate during physical pain, particularly a region called the anterior cingulate cortex, lit up during the social exclusion. At a fairly deep neurological level, your brain does not cleanly separate I am being physically hurt from I am being socially excluded. It treats both as threats worth responding to immediately, before your conscious reasoning even has a chance to weigh in. This is the part people tend to miss when they tell themselves to simply stop caring what others think. You're not negotiating with a preference you can talk yourself out of. You're negotiating with a threat detection system that evolved to fire faster than logic can catch up to it. The racing heartbeat before you speak in public, the mental replay loop after an awkward conversation, hours or even days later, the disproportionate sting of a stranger's blank, unreadable expression. None of these are overreactions in the way we usually use that word. They're a system doing exactly the job it was built to do, just running on outdated intelligence about what actually constitutes danger today. This also explains something almost everyone has experienced, but rarely thinks about. Why judgment doesn't just feel bad emotionally. It feels bad in your body. The flush of heat in your face when you're embarrassed. The urge to look away, shrink, or physically leave the room. Researchers studying shame and self-conscious emotions, including psychologist Michael Lewis, have shown that these reactions emerge remarkably early in human development, well before a child has the language to explain what they're feeling. A toddler who's caught doing something wrong in front of others will often show the same blushing, gaze aversion, and body-lowering response you'd see in an adult caught in an embarrassing moment decades later. That consistency across age and culture is a strong signal that this isn't a learned social nicety. It's closer to a hardwired signal, similar to fear or disgust. Blushing in particular is a strange evolutionary puzzle, because unlike almost every other stress response, it's involuntary and impossible to hide. Some researchers have argued that's exactly the point. Blushing may function as an honest, unfakeable signal to the group that you know you've broken a rule and that you accept the judgment, a kind of built-in apology mechanism that helped repair social standing before language ever could. In other words, even your body's most embarrassing, uncontrollable reactions to judgment may themselves be an evolved survival tool. Here's the part that reframes the entire story. This fear didn't just protect individuals one at a time. It may be one of the central reasons large-scale human cooperation was possible at all. Long before written law, courts, judges, or police, human groups still face the exact same core problem every society has faced since. How do you stop people from cheating, stealing, or exploiting the group's trust in a way that doesn't require constant policing? A group where anyone can freeload without consequence collapses quickly. Cooperation only survives if there's some cost to breaking it. The mechanism that filled that role, in society after society, independently, was reputation. In small-scale societies, gossip functions as a remarkably efficient enforcement tool. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer and small-scale societies across radically different environments, from Kalahari foraging bands to Arctic communities to Pacific Island cultures, have documented the same underlying pattern again and again. People who violate group norms rarely need to be formally punished. They simply get talked about, and being talked about, being seen as untrustworthy by the group whose approval you depend on for survival, changes behavior almost as effectively as a formal penalty, at a fraction of the cost and without needing a single institution to enforce it. This is worth sitting with, because it completely flips the usual framing people default to. We tend to experience the fear of judgment as a personal burden, something we each individually struggle with. But at a species level, it may be one of the earliest and cheapest law enforcement systems ever built. A form of social regulation that required no courts, no enforcement class, no written code, just a group's collective opinion and a nervous system in every single member of that group wired to care about that opinion more than almost anything else. There's a related piece of this worth separating out because it explains a slightly different but connected everyday experience: the constant, almost involuntary habit of comparing yourself to the people around you. In 1954, psychologist Leon Festinger proposed what's now called social comparison theory, the idea that humans have a built-in drive to evaluate themselves by measuring against others, especially when there's no objective yardstick available. There's no built-in ruler for, am I doing okay at life? So your brain borrows one from the people around you. This is closely related to, but not identical to, the fear of judgment. Fear of judgment is about how others see you. Social comparison is about how you see yourself relative to others, but they feed each other constantly. If you believe you're falling short compared to your group, you also anticipate that the group will judge you for it. And that anticipation alone is often enough to change your behavior long before anyone actually says a word. Put those two systems together, a brain that automatically compares you to the group and a brain that automatically flinches at the idea of being judged by that same group, and you get something close to a constant background process, quietly running in almost every social interaction you have. Not everyone experiences this fear with the same intensity, and that difference isn't random either. Psychologist Geraldine Downey's research on what's called rejection sensitivity found that people who experienced inconsistent or harsh responses from caregivers early in life often develop a heightened, faster triggering version of this exact same alarm system. They don't just dislike rejection more, they anxiously anticipate it, sometimes perceiving it in situations where it isn't actually present at all, like reading a neutral text message as cold or a delayed reply as a sign someone is upset with them. This matters because it shows the system isn't fixed, it's calibrated. The same underlying survival mechanism gets tuned differently depending on what a person's early environment taught them about how safe or unsafe judgment actually was. Which means the intensity of this fear isn't a measure of how weak or strong someone is. It's closer to a setting, shaped by history, on a system every single human being has. So if this fear is this useful and this old, Why does it so often feel like it's working against us now instead of for us? Because the entire system was calibrated for an audience of roughly 150 people. People who knew your full history, your context, your intentions, and who you'd likely be dealing with for decades. Judgment in that world was informed. It came from people who had years of evidence about who you actually were, not just one moment of you. Now compare that to a single post online. You're not being judged by 150 people who know your context anymore. You can be judged in an instant by thousands of complete strangers who see one sentence, stripped entirely of your tone, your history, and your intention, form a snap opinion in seconds, and then disappear, never to become part of your life, never to get to know you further, never to update that first impression. The volume is different now. The stakes are different. The permanence is different too. A single bad moment can be captured, shared, and outlive the context that would have explained it in a way no ancestral tribe could ever have replicated. But your nervous system doesn't know any of that has changed. It's still running 150-person math on 1,000-person inputs and reacting with the same raw intensity it would if this specific group of strangers controlled whether you ate this winter. Researchers in evolutionary psychology sometimes call this an evolutionary mismatch, a trait that was highly adaptive in the environment it evolved in, but generates disproportionate stress in an environment it was never designed to operate in. The fear of judgment isn't malfunctioning. It's functioning exactly as intended, for a world that stopped existing roughly 10,000 years ago. This mismatch isn't just an interesting evolutionary footnote. It has measurable consequences. Clinical psychologists studying social anxiety describe a pattern where this ancient alarm system, tuned too high for the modern environment, starts driving avoidance, skipping opportunities to speak, to be seen, to be evaluated at all, simply to make the alarm stop ringing. The tragic irony is that avoidance often backfires. The less often you let yourself be judged, the less evidence your nervous system collects that judgment is usually survivable. So the alarm never gets recalibrated. It just keeps firing at full volume indefinitely because it's never given the chance to learn that the tribe didn't actually vanish, that the person didn't actually starve, that being seen and disapproved of, even by a stranger online, is not in fact the same thing as exile from a group you depend on to live. That's why a single critical comment from someone you'll never meet, someone with zero power over your food, safety, or future, can genuinely disrupt your entire day. Your prefrontal cortex knows, logically, that this person's opinion carries no real consequence. The older, faster system underneath it does not. It still responds as if exile is on the table, because for most of the time this system has existed, it usually was. So maybe the fear of being judged was never irrational at all. Maybe it's proof that some part of you is still standing in a small circle around a fire that stopped burning 10,000 years ago, still scanning the faces around you, still asking the exact same question every human being before you has asked, in every language, in every culture, across every version of this species. Do I still belong here? The only thing that's actually changed is the circle itself. It used to close every night when the fire went out and everyone went to sleep, safe, among people who already knew them. Now, for the first time in the history of our species, it never does.